I got a little upset with our people. I said, what quality of ship? Excellent, sir. Top of the line. I said, why did we just capture the ship? We could have used it. Why did we sink them? They said, it's more fun to sink them. I said, they like sinking them better. They say it's safer to sink them. I guess it's probably true.
Let's go live to Washington now to speak to our correspondent, Sarah Firth. Sarah, thank you so much for joining us. That was, of course, Donald Trump's speech last night. Lots of people were watching that. But Trump did describe the sinking of 46 Iranian vessels as fun and a short-term excursion. Given the verified casualties on both sides, how is the administration responding to critics who are arguing this rhetoric is actually at odds with the gravity of the military activity right now?
Well, Leanne, look, we've seen the administration double down in the past on President Trump's very aggressive rhetoric when it comes to this conflict in particular and past conflicts. It's interesting, we watched that clip of him speaking there in Florida. He was talking about a discussion he was having with a member of the military where he said, you know, he was asking, why don't they capture those Navy ships? And the response he said was that it's more fun to sink them. Now, that was met in the room with laughter from some of those Republican attendees at that conference. But it certainly raised some concern in military circles here in Washington. You've had, again, recently with this conflict and the rhetoric around it from the administration, from President Trump himself, from the Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth, you've had very serious criticism that this is making light of what is a very serious situation with U.S. service members being killed. Now, you've just had the dignified transfer of the 7th U.S. service member to have been killed in this conflict with Iran. And so you've had the likes, Leanne, of Senator Tim Kaine. He referred to a previous comment of President Trump's when he'd spoken about the war being a short excursion. He described this as deeply disrespectful to service members. Now, that's the mood that I'm getting from a lot of the sources I'm speaking to within the military community. Again, this isn't the first time that President Trump has used this kind of rhetoric that seems very removed from the reality on the ground in this conflict, very removed from what service members are facing, the risks that they're facing as they participate in this conflict launched by the United States and Israel against Iran. And so there's certainly a sense that it's rhetoric not particularly fitting of the seriousness of the moment.
And Sarah, I did watch Pete Hegseth speak a little bit earlier, and he seemed a lot more measured and actually didn't seem as bombastic as he had been before. But President Trump has said the conflict is pretty much complete. However, with Iran's new leadership vowing to continue resistance, how do the president's claims of an imminent end to the war actually make any sense to the facts on the ground?
Yes, this is the question we've been asking the administration repeatedly since the start of this war. We're now well into the second week. And the question really is, what is the long-term plan here? And the administration hasn't, Leanne, given a clear answer. Now, you're right. You heard President Trump coming out and saying that the war, he felt, was almost complete. But then you had the Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth. He came out and said, look, this is just the beginning. So President Trump then, in that speech we heard on Monday, backing up the Secretary of Defense, saying that, yes, this is just the beginning. President Trump saying we could go further and we're going to go further. This is just an example of the very mixed messaging around this conflict in Iran. There are questions on Capitol Hill about the legality of this conflict. Most Democrats, Leanne, as critical of the conflict. You've had Iraqi, Afghanistan veterans, American service members who've been on the front lines of America's conflicts in the past in Iraq and Afghanistan. They've spoken to Congress. They've told of some of the realities of war that they've faced, and they've warned as well the Trump administration about the potential for longer term involvement the more this continues. you have had Americans now paying attention, of course, as you guys have been reporting. Here in the US, Americans potentially facing higher prices at the petrol pump. That will really put the pressure on President Trump. He's made an explicit promise to Americans that he would lower those prices. And you've also, Leanne, got a lot of focus here on the fact that whilst the administration is championing and expressing its victory, if you like, over the Iranian Navy and the success they've had in their military campaign against the Navy, what Iran has shown is that they don't need that Navy to successfully disrupt transport through the Strait of Hormuz. So it's clear, despite the rhetoric coming from the White House, that this is a vastly different reality on the ground. And Leanne, one further point that I want to raise, because a lot of people are talking about it here, particularly humanitarian groups, military veteran families, about the reality of war and the impact of it. And I want to read you something from UNICEF, from one of their spokesmen, James Elder. He was speaking about the fact that we've had the reports, of course, about the attack on the school in Iran at the start of the war. There's new video that's just been released that seems to back up claims that it was a US strike. Now, he said, here we are, another war. He said the tolerance for the killing of children seems to be expanding. The killing, he says, of a single child should stop us cold. So there is really a sense that the rhetoric around this conflict, right from the start, it is undermining the reality that US service members are facing, but also, Leanne, the deaths of Iranians and people in the conflict on the ground.
Sarah Firth, as they say, a lot of the wars are won on propaganda, but very interesting. Thank you so much for joining me.